Hello, folks, and good morning! Welcome to a quick little discussion on the Final Fantasy Tactics remake slash Ivalice Chronicles slash the thing that people are currently losing their collective pants over for what is ultimately going to end up probably being basically no reason. Now, let's go ahead and get into this thing because, as with always, every time that there's a remake, there's going to be pissed off people. It doesn't matter how many things are improved, how many things are addressed, how many times they are directly trying to address a lot of the things that came up with Tor's release a couple of years ago, and it doesn't matter. People are still going to be pissed no matter what. You know, y'all are just kind of dramatic sometimes. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into this, shall we? Because I wanted to talk about just how much evidence we have towards there being a lot of additional content, not word lines getting cut. In fact, actually, a lot of the sort of discussion there was just like, oh no, they just secretly hate War of the Lions, and they wanted to go make their own versions. And I love that Titanium Legman brought this up in his most recent video because, Matsuno was basically talking about how much he loved the War of the Lions translation when people were talking about being pissed off at Unicorn Overlord over like slightly different pronoun usage or something. Like, people will be pissed off no matter what. Like, do not underestimate the utter volume of angry neckbeards out of their basements. So, let's go ahead and get into this, shall we? So, first of all, what are we seeing on this particular screen right here? Because a lot of this stuff can be kind of nipped in the bud right here. So, on the left, classic version. So, classic version unites the graphics and gameplay of the original with the renowned War of the Lions translation. What are they trying to say here? Well, original PS1 version, very good. Very nice sound, very crispy graphics. We like you very much, but oh no, translation is super jank to the point that the story oftentimes does not actually come across. Now, I prefer the jankiness of PS1 translations because there's a certain charm to it, but you know, either way, it is what it is. So, essentially, what they're saying is, hey, look, people loved the translation of the PSP version, but holy crap, the sound design was awful. It was kind of a mixed bag. How many of those cutscenes actually made sense or not? And either way, you know, we're going to take the translation that people loved from the PSP version. We're going to take the gameplay and graphics that people loved from the PS1 version, and there you go. You have both of essentially what people are considered the best things coming out of both of those versions as the classic version. You got the original classic UI, the original classic gameplay, all that kind of thing, and you don't have to go and bend over backwards with whatever emulators or whatever else, or try to explain emulators to your elderly relatives who just want to go back and try some Final Fantasy Tactics, right? And additionally, you don't have to tell people to go try the mobile version and then try to explain why on earth it's randomly fast-forwarding every few seconds and then also slowing down in the menus. Again, there's a lot of asterisks to that particular thing, but you got the classic version, and then what does that say for the enhanced version? So, enhanced version features a renewed interface, extensive additions. Oh gee, additions means they added shit! No way! And adjustments to the story, fully voiced dialogue, and much, much more. So, okay, much more. That seems to indicate, oh wow, they also didn't just take a hacksaw to the thing. Fascinating! Anyway, let's go ahead and discuss some of the things that were brought up as evidence, however, because this is kind of hilarious. And again, you know, thank you to Titanium Legman for actually mentioning this in his as well, because immediately, one thing that we see right over here, if we go to the very start of it, is, oh hey, guess what? They did redo the intro cutscenes, as in redid them, as in remade them, as in did different stuff with them, meaning that we have animated cutscenes. They're probably not going to be the exact same War of the Lions versions, but they're probably going to be remade. Now, why would they need to be remade? Because the PSP had a weird resolution, namely 480 by 272, meaning that this is a resolution that is one quarter of what would have been considered HD, oh, you know, like 15 frickin' years ago. So, it was already not exactly looking terribly pretty. This right here is those original cutscenes scaled up to 1080p with a few supposed enhancements or whatever else. This is not even the original version, because the originals are super crunched and fuzzy and, you know, kind of hard to see, and also, due to size limitations, randomly cut off at super awkward times. So, essentially, we have something that's very cool as far as the style and aesthetic goes, but man oh man was it compromised. Again, compare that with this right here. Wow, this looks surprisingly prettier. Yes, same art style, but as you'll notice, wow, everything looks way nicer. It's almost like that's an enhancement. Now, that said, Why exactly would this be an issue as far as just, hey, have the AI upscale it or whatever else? If you took the original stuff and had it upscaled, you are going to wind up with, again, weird resolution issues. If we take a look at the screen right now, what are you noticing? It's mega widescreen, right? So you either, let's say, crunch it down in order to have it sort of like smush itself vertically a little bit, or you try to stretch this thing out, or you try to cut off the sides. Now tell me any one of those solutions that will not result in even more pissed off people, right? So essentially, no matter what way they could have gone about it, it just ended up being a better option to go about doing it in a way that, well, made everything how they wanted it to be in the first place. They got the aesthetic right, but when it came to which things they wanted to have redone or not, well, like you're seeing the result right here. Now, another thing I want to point out here is that essentially what seems to be implied with this enhanced version is that they're potentially going to be, again, looking at the sort of best of both worlds scenario. Having scenes right before this fight was pretty awesome. However, having cutscenes for the actual kidnapping scene, like right here, ended up taking away from a lot of the action. Because we saw everybody running around, we saw people banging their fists on stuff, but it would cut every time that somebody went through a door. It was hard to tell where the action was, it was hard to tell who was where. And so in this particular case, let's say you have Agrius tries to run out of the back, she ends up getting gutted by Delita and kidnapped over that way. We see that your main team is separated over here, we see that Agrius is trying to make her way through the inside, we see that he's escaping out of the side, and we see that nobody can reach him. A lot of the action is a lot more quickly conveyed in this particular situation. It's a lot more efficient as far as explaining the scene, and we already know from tweets coming out of Matsuno and whatever else that it was their intention to convey the story as best they could, just like with Tactics Ogre Reborn, where everything in the sort of updated version was in service to getting you kind of immersed into the fights, as far as just like, you just go into the fight and you innately know how you're fighting, what you're fighting. Like even with Geomancies, you don't have to go through menus, it'll tell you right here. It describes what all the grass is, it describes all the information that you need for your units, you don't have to go through any additional menus. It's all very efficiently crafted to make it so that you can just intuit everything around you. It's got a good UI, it's got a good HUD, essentially giving you all the information that you need on screen at one time, so that you don't have to be taken out of the experience. You can fight, move on to the next scene, fight, move on to the next scene. It's, again, efficiency and movement, but it doesn't take away from the actual mechanics in this particular way. Again, going back to how this team addressed a lot of the issues with the PSP version of Tactics Ogre Reborn, they essentially looked at the extensive list of all the different skills there. They're like, okay, this is like disgusting in terms of its inefficiency. We've got some classes that are getting a hold of skills that they will never train by the end of the game. We've got like half of them running into that problem. We've got another half with skills that are just plain busted. Another selection of them that are just like very situationally busted, but also in such a way that it's really annoying to fight against when the AI has it, but nearly useless to the player. Stuff like Rampart Aura, let's say, or rather Rampart Shadow, a skill that was way too expensive for the player to reasonably use as a way to create a sort of infinite wall of barricades, but additionally, when the AI used it, it was extremely annoying. Stuff like Phalanx was something that the player would choose, essentially use as a cheese tool if they ran a character completely naked, but then if the AI used it, it oftentimes resulted in player casualties with nothing they could reasonably do about it. And essentially what we saw in Tor is that they reworked all of them to one unified system through the cards, where essentially breaking through and accessing harder to reach areas in the map, like let's say you chose to burn some tiles, you rummaged through boxes, whatever else, you got your cards that you then used to boost your skills, which suddenly meant that you could take your turn to boost your skills, to suddenly have your phalanx up at all times, to suddenly get free MP at all times, to, let's say, have your magic extended at all times. Stuff like that was a very efficient use of a lot of different systems being combined into one thing that made it very intuitive to play, okay? And what's funny is that a lot of the angry complaints that came out of Tor came completely out of left field from that complete misunderstanding over like, oh, it had 10 skill slots before, now it's only 4. They're like ignoring the fact that you got like a dozen different passives on everybody that are just part of your equipment, part of your setup. You don't have to worry about things like training somebody how to parry or deflect. Both of those got merged and added to your weapon. You didn't have to worry about things like movement skills. Those got added to your gear. Essentially, your gloves became your climbing gear. Your legs became your movement gear. Your armor became your swimming gear. You don't have to worry about 30% of your slots just right there. You don't have to worry about things like movement abilities having to be activated anymore. Like the sheer amount of quality of life that they threw into Tactics Ogre Reborn that angry reviews had a tendency to just try and just trample over and over and over was maddening to me as somebody that absolutely loves all versions of that game. Because it was essentially completely ignoring what was a downright work of art of efficiency in systems, okay? And essentially, what we're seeing in the remake so far, from what very little we've seen so far, again, they seem to be keeping more of the original systems as far as we can tell, but we're seeing a lot more information conveyed a lot more smoothly to essentially allow somebody to make a lot of the same decisions that they would have made before with a lot less jank. You know, and additionally, I want to point out, as far as classes are concerned, so there's a very interesting thing that we're seeing as far as, arguments are going with the two classes that we don't technically see yet, and that was the Dark Knight and the Onion Knight. And the thing is, I emphasized this a ton in the previous video, but you have to understand, if you've played the original version, just how awkward the PSP editions were. Because again, while you could, let's say, grind to get yourself an Onion Knight fairly early on, the thing was pretty near useless. Its mechanics weren't really explained, and then it would end up being super overpowered once you got access to its equipment. Stuff like the Dark Knight you could grind to, and then it became ridiculously overpowered, but again, they took a really long time to get to, and they were just sort of there, with no pomp and circumstance. Both of them are really cool, iconic classes, in theory, but the way that they were introduced was super awkward. But here's the thing. Think about how they could be implemented in a cooler way, alright? Throw away how the original did it. Think about how you might improve on that. And one of the coolest suggestions I heard actually came from a comment I read a few hours ago, in which somebody was saying, you know what, as far as the Onion Knight is concerned, how cool would it be if instead of mastering classes in order to update the thing, which would make it overpowered anyway, what if it leaned more into its character and it essentially was ranked by your treasure hunter rank? Like, you send somebody out on away missions, and this Onion Knight, right? Let's say they just, like, transform into an Onion Knight with enough away missions. They suddenly become proficient at using whatever equipment they came across, because they're going and using whatever equipment they run into out on their jobs. Suddenly, you know, their treasure hunter rank, which was previously a pretty meaningless thing, every time you're acquiring these new artifacts, your Onion Knight is getting stronger. That is a really damn cool idea if they were to implement something like that. When it comes to something like the Dark Knight, I was mentioning this in the previous video, but it was just kind of a one-off comment, but with a class like that, imagine if you could get one per playthrough, and it's just whoever you had go collect Gafgarian's crystal. He always crystallizes, he never drops a chest. And how cool would it be if that was basically like your bonus objective? If it worked like, let's say, the Dark Knights in Ogre Battle 64, where it's just like, it's a specific objective from one map, and it allows you to get a hold of this unique unit. Now, granted, they had 4, and it was like mantles and belovas, but still, in this particular case, if we just had whoever inherited Gafgarian's title, that would be pretty damn cool. Like, that would be a way cooler way of implementing it. And suddenly, you know, you have that class just replacing the Squire for that character like we see with every other special class. It would be a really special way to include the thing, you know? So, basically what we're seeing is a case where we know that a bunch of stuff was added, updated, whatever else. We don't know specifically what that means as of yet, but what we do know is that stuff was, again, enhanced and added to across the board according to what they've told us. Alright, so a quick little interruption here, because I wanted to tell a little bit of a story here, because we have precedent for all of this stuff before. So I mentioned that about 2.5, 3-ish years ago, we had a remake come out for TO, so Tactics Ogre Reborn. We had that come out, and in the lead-up to its release, there was basically a whole big thing over the fact that, okay, you know, where's the rogue? The rogue is not in the list. Where be rogue? And basically it wasn't there. And they mentioned immediately at the time, they're like, yeah, you know what, we ran into complications putting the thing up there. Now, unfortunately, at the time, there was a mistranslation, because I'm assuming somebody was using some auto-translate type thing, but there was a mistranslation in which it was saying, oh yeah, we basically didn't have time, and something about the AI, you know, some garbled information there, and it turns out that no, that mistranslation was meant to say they did not have enough time and money to actually implement this thing in here. And this is to compare this with the reaction that we saw from DK and OK here, essentially what we see is that there hasn't been anything at all. They're just like, okay, they just haven't come up. And what we've seen from from the other information in the background is that all signs generally point towards essentially two different versions. You have the original version, which would not have had those two, but then you have the enhanced version, which more than likely probably has them in there in a different way. And I don't know where I'm actually going to edit this into the rest of it, so I might have already covered it. It might be covered in the future. I don't know. But the point is, when it came up for the Rogue there, it was addressed directly, and when it came up for, DK, OK, all of that, it is still an unknown. So to me, that indicates, okay, no, it's probably not cut, it's probably implemented in some other way. But for another thing, I want to explain the level that it takes to actually see a thing get cut. See, the Rogue in particular is a very special, unique case. It's a situation where we not only essentially have their word for it as far as what went wrong, we don't need to speculate, because we also have an incredible fan modder who was essentially putting together what's known as Tactics Ogre One Vision over the course of a decade. The guy is insanely good, and in order to implement the Rogue, in order to actually update it for the One Vision mod, even the drop tables took him like a year. Because it was a case where the original version had basically implemented a bunch of unique mechanics just for this one unit. Essentially, like, if we go down to the skills menu here, like, we have the steal skill, and you might be thinking, okay, in FFT you run up and you steal equipment. It's not the same thing. In this particular case, it was like, there is a specific dedicated second drop table for every single unit. TO has multiple different spawns per map they can pop up, because your map is like kind of mildly randomized every time you play through the game. So essentially, you've got potentially, like 20-30 different drop tables just for this one skill alone per fight, of which there are hundreds, of which there's several permutations of those same things to begin with as well. So already that is an astronomical amount of effort, and then on top of that, I don't think I even have that had that on this particular one as of yet. You also had the booby trap mechanic, which basically was just entirely its own terrain interaction kind of thing. The actual original stuff that this particular skill tried to do didn't even work properly in the PSP version. So it would have been basically like, you take this thing that completely doesn't function, you retie it to something completely new in order to somehow hopefully get somebody to use this skill that nobody ever used, because it was like, it is a trap skill that only goes off if somebody ends their turn there, and they have to be one turn away, and most of those explosions are AoEs. So anyway, point is, it was suffering from like 3 dimensions of bizarro issues, right? But that's the level that it took for that to happen. And from kind of what I was inferring at the time, it seemed like it was happening kind of later in development. But that's the level that it actually takes for something to be cut. It wasn't a case of just like, oh, we don't like this thing, bah, just get it out of here, let them eat cake kind of bullshit. Essentially, what we see is that they genuinely try to get everything that they possibly can in there. Again, earned that that sort of good faith, as it were. But yeah, that, like, when I saw somebody earlier today going and comparing the situations, like, they're not even remotely similar. What we see in FFTIC is a case where a lot of the mechanics are essentially carried forward directly as they were. In the case of Tor, like, this thing had so many things reworked, it's not even funny. And again, for further context, just to kind of bring this up here, like in Tor's case, what I was saying before about people freaking out over, like, oh no, all of my skill list was boggled down, and it was just like this, like, your skill list was like this, like, oh no, strengthen and fortify, you mean they don't have a permanent slot on there? Like, how you have the whole JP boost, and people have been arguing for decades now over, like, whether a remake should get rid of JP boost. Yeah, now imagine if you had, like, a few dozen of those on every single class. Like, it's that kind of thing, where it's just like, pick, the majority of your list is just like, here's a bunch of stuff you can't live without, and then the actual interesting stuff ends up completely unused because the passives are just better. So it's like, yeah, it would be cool to see a rogue go and do Sporogmos doing, like, cool, ninja shit and whatever else, but, well, sorry, no spots left on there. Oh, booby traps and disarm? I mean, you're never going to use them, they suck, but even if they didn't suck, if you decided to try and make this work, that still would take 20% of your skill slots, which could potentially be something like a 40% reduction in their stats. So, yeah. That was not happening. So yeah, things like ranking up your ability to go and negotiate with certain racial types and things like that, and then combining that with the racial skills, man, that was potentially a really cool idea. And then again, just it didn't have the means to actually be done because, oh shoot, everyone's running anatomy because this does the same thing for like 90% of the units of the game. So it again, understand that this stuff isn't just being farted out in a vacuum. Anyway, I should probably find a spot to go edit this in now. Alright, moving on. Now, again, I think that they've definitely earned, after the kinds of really kind of deep-cut takes that we saw in Tactics Ogre Reborn, I think we'll see some really interesting changes coming out of this one, where it seems like stuff is the same as it was before, but it's going to be different in ways that potentially only long-timers may appreciate. That new players will have a cool new enhanced version to go and experience something completely new, but for the old-timers, they still have that original version included in this thing. They don't have to worry about emulation. For players that are going to gripe about, like, oh, I can't believe they changed this, that, or the other, unlike what happened with Tor, they can compare the two directly. I wish that they had included the PSP version when it came to Tor's release, because when it comes to that one, yeah, dude, people were bitching over stuff that they clearly have not played in over a decade on my channel for years, and continue to do so to this day. Calling it a cash grab that didn't change anything, or a cash grab that changed too much. Like, dude, it is... whatever the polar opposite of heartwarming is what that is. Now, one more thing I want to mention here. Mentioned this in the first video too, but as far as the additions go, we can definitely expect to see more side story content showing up. So I would expect that we're going to see a lot more from like the church free agents and stuff like that. Potentially find out more of what some of the characters were up to off in the background, because it does feel like that whole church plot on the tail end of the game is just sort of rushed through. You're just like showing up to like disaster scene after disaster scene, and it's like, I would really like to have seen what cool shit these guys were up to in the background. And it would have been really neat to, potentially run to, let's say, the rumor section and be like, oh, hey, look, here's some side stories. Here's some preset battles with somebody else's team, some challenge battles, stuff like that. Essentially, like an improved version of, like, Triangle Strategies bar fights. I would really expect to see something like that popping in there. Might be really cool. Additionally, one thing that was kind of out of left field here, I wonder if we can find a picture that actually match this, but one thing that I found particularly funny, I was thinking the other day that for all the characters that they could have added, because there's a lot of talk over what we're going to go ahead and see as far as mascot characters go, where potentially... actually, one more thing before we carry on. Somebody was mentioning that there is not blood on this scene with Elmdor here. Alright, so... here's the original PS1 version, just to go ahead and compare here, because the complaint as it was going around was that the gore was removed from this scene, and this is actually a little bit of a misremembering kind of thing, because I think many of us potentially remember a lot of the impalements or whatever else going on here as being a lot more gory, because one of them later on is, but as you can see right here, that's not gore. There's just a slight edge on the thing, like you see the same thing on the one on the ground. It's just kind of a little bit of a framing. It's the same thing that I do on the letters for all of the thumbnails and stuff like that. It's just a little bit of edging on there to make it stick out from the background. Anyway, moving on. Anyways, so as far as characters that they could have added, right? There's talk of Mr. Edgy Ifrit guy. There's talk of, Mr. I'm gonna go punch the devil guy. But, I don't hear any talk of whatever the hell the name was of that dog from the one with the rich kids traveling around in their car. Because the thing is, that dog, side character, interesting kind of idea there. But apparently petting said dog caused time travel or some shit. I don't know. I did not play that game. I have no interest to, but I have seen people making fun of it, and that dog ended up coming up frequently. And/or potentially we could use Renoa's dog from FF8 if they plan to do an FF8 remake. Now, why do I mention this specifically? Because think about it for a second. It is super weird how you basically get the entire farm in FFT. You can ride your chickens. You can recruit your cows. You can recruit your cat with the quars. You got your cows over here. You got the random buried skeletons over here. You have access to your pigs. With their whole bequeath bacon thing. You have your ducks and birds and other things. There's no dogs. How are there no dogs? People call each other dogs, but you never see a dog. It is the most random thing. But it was bugging me so much the other day. Partially because I was watching or listening to the Good Boys series, which if you've never read that trilogy, do it. I will offer no context, just do it. Anyways, so that's about that. That's just all I wanted to say. I'm more than positive that we are going to see a lot of things added and reintroduced in more interesting ways, not taken out. Again, what we saw with Tactics Ogre Reborn was that people were complaining over, like, they took out this, that, or the other, this, that, or the other, and it was re-implemented somewhere else. Oh no, they took out the ability to transfer dead characters to other characters, but you could use the Ogre Blade to essentially merge classes. Like, oh no, they took out the ability to add 10 skill slots, but you had the effect of way more than 10 skill slots through your equipment, through all of your other skills and whatnot. Oh no, they took out the ability to power dump everything with orbs, and realistically now the orbs were a lot more free to craft. We had things like more interesting scaling off of things like orbs and grenades and things like that. Oh no, they took out the throwing ability, which was absolute ass to begin with, and frankly grenades do the same job of the entire category, just a lot more efficiently. So either way, I would expect to see changes that you would, well, not expect. I would expect to see things changed in ways that will initially piss people off before they realize, oh shoot, this is actually kind of genius, actually. Anyways, so I gotta get back to whatever I was doing. I just wanted to throw this out there, and yeah, that's kind of about that. So, yeah, episode is a good one. Take care, thank you for stopping by, and I will see y'all in the next one. Yeah, I probably should have gotten into the whole fact that they added, again, a Tactics Ogre style overhead camera, which is pretty darn nifty. Technically, they had that in the mobile version, but it just looked really crappy in the mobile version. Anyways. So, I gotta get going. Y'all take care. See you in the next one.